Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this webinar today titled Publishing 3D Content in Europeana. This is a webinar organized by the Time Machine organization in collaboration with CARARE and Europeana. My name is Ilaria Manzini. You don't see it on my icon, but that's my name. I'm here today in my role as the local Time Machines manager within Time Machine organization. And the reason why we thought it would be very important to organize this event today is because we know, of course, that several of the local Time Machine projects that are part of our ecosystem, but also, of course, several of our members within Time Machine do develop 3D models, 3D content as part of their projects. And with this event today, we want to inform you, to, of course, encourage you, but also guide you really step by step through the process of ingesting 3D models and the related metadata into the Europeana portal. But first, some context. Europeana, together with Time Machine, Carare, and Inception, is part of the Europeana data space consortium, which aims to create the common European data space for cultural heritage. This Europeana data space will support Europe's cultural sector in the digital transition, in the digital transformation, and will promote the creation, use, and reuse of content across sectors, including, for instance, tourism, education, also scientific research, and in the creative industries more in general. And in the framework of this Europeana data space consortium, a specific sort of sub-goal is the aggregation of 3D content for this data space for cultural heritage. And to this aim, the members of the data space consortium have come together to roll out a communications campaign, which is called 3D for Data Space, which aims at encouraging and guiding institutions throughout Europe through this process of contributing 3D content to the Europeana portal. And the webinar we're organizing and hosting today is part of this campaign in that sense. And now I should leave the floor to first one of my colleagues, Henk Alkemade from Carare, who will give an introduction on the webinar and explain a bit what the program of the day is. However, first, please allow me some housekeeping. Kindly note, of course, that this meeting is recorded. You have already approved this in the registration phase, but this is a recorded meeting that will also be circulated and published on our websites. And if you have questions, please do not hesitate to post them in the chat, which I will be monitoring. So I will make sure that if the question is urgent, needs to be addressed right away, I will stop the speaker at the earliest convenience. And otherwise, we do have a Q&A and discussion part at the end of the general part of the event. So welcome again, and I leave it to Henk to take the floor.
Thank you, Ilaria. Hi, everyone. I hope you are having a great afternoon this afternoon. You will have, because you are here. Let me share my screen. Coming up now, and also like this. Can you see my screen? Well, great. Okay. Let me walk you through this webinar a bit. My name is Henk Alkemade. I'm representing Karara here in this webinar. And what we're aiming to do today is to explore Europeana's policy and requirements for 3D models, so you know what is needed to have them represented well in Europeana. I will present Karara's role and services to publish this 3D content in Europeana. And we will learn from some use cases from local time machine organizations in using Share3D for publishing in Europeana. And of course, we will experience the steps in the Share3D workflow and will briefly touch upon the Mint REPOX workflow. I'll explain about that later. So there will be 2 presentations, followed by 3 demonstrations, after which there will be time for questions and discussions reserved. The first of the presentations is by Lianne Heslinga of Europeana Foundation about Europeana and 3D models, explaining requirements, quality requirements, and so on. And also the scope and the public goals they want to achieve. Next will be a short presentation about the role of Karara and the workflows we support. And we'll have some use cases by Stefan Zetlacher from the PLUS organization and Beatrice Valienti from EPFL. They will introduce and explain themselves. And after that, we have a step-by-step walk through the Share3D workflow by Sander Münster from TMO and Jena University. After we have finished with questions, discussions, and so on, there is for the people who really want to do that, there's the opportunity to test the Share3D workflow with assistance by instructors. So you can try it out and get any help you need in the last, say, half hour of the program. The people who don't want to do that are free to go. So I think this is it for the program. And I'll leave the floor to Lianne Heslinga to tell us more about Europeana and 3D.
Thank you, Henk. Thank you, Ilaria. I will now share my screen, and then we can start. Yeah, do you see my screen? Okay, great. Well, as I was saying, thank you for the opportunity, the invitation by Karara and Time Machine to include Europeana, of course, in this. We're all colleagues, but it's nice to do. I am Lianne Heslinga. Hello, everyone. I am Metadata Coordinator at the Europeana Foundation. I work in the data publishing services team, which means we are doing the aggregation and the processing of cultural heritage data. And that is what I will talk about a bit today. So, for those of you who do not know Europeana, I will briefly say a bit about this. So Europeana is at the heart of the common European data space for cultural heritage. What does that mean? And what is a data space? At the end of the presentation, I will say a bit more. And also, well, Ilaria said a bit about it. I'm sure Henk will say a bit about it. So I think in the end, you will have a bit of a clearer view. But the idea is that the common European data space for cultural heritage accelerates the digital transformation that is already going on of Europe's cultural sector and fosters the creation and reuse of content in the cultural and creative sectors, indeed. So currently and historically, we already have 2 websites. You can see them on the screen here. For me, the screen is left, so I sometimes look that way. It is Europeana.eu, where you can find discover all the cultural heritage objects, and also the pro.europeana.eu, And there you can find everything about the Europeana ecosystem. You can find the Europeana Network Association, the Europeana Aggregators Forum, and everything you need to know about sharing, connecting, capacity building, and background information. So, zooming in, 3D in Europeana. Successful 3D campaigns have already been executed. For example, we have had delivery through Share 3D that you will work with today as well, brought with by Karara, and also they contributed to the ARMA project as well. And we had quite a lot of 3D objects to the Weave project. So we can do it. Currently, there are a bit less than 6,000 3D items in Europeana. And here, I'm not sure if you can see it move, but let's see. Here you can see an example. Do you see an example? Ah, great. Then example of a 3D model. It's a colorful jar contributed by the Hunt Museum and aggregated by Karara. So this is what it looks like in the Europeana interface, the item page, as we call it. Yes. Start. This is, of course, what you want to know. How do you also get your 3D model on Europeana? It is simple. It starts, of course, with publishing your content online. So to publish your content online, that will be discussed afterwards. Also, the step-by-step guides that will happen in part 2 will guide you through the process of having it ready online. But it's not in Europeana yet. So I will talk to you briefly about 2 points: the EDM and the EPF. The EPF is Europeana's publishing framework, and the EDM is the Europeana data model. Let's start with the Europeana data model. You may or may not be familiar with EDM, but this model is used for the structuring of the metadata and connecting metadata and content in a standardized way. It has, if you want to compare it to something, it has a bit of elements of the doubling core model and is used by us in an XML format. We are currently looking into extending this specifically to meet the 3D needs. But as I told you, we already have quite some 3D objects published, so it already works as it is. But of course, things can always be improved. Yes, and then here you see another example. Actually, this is the same example that I just showed you before. Can you see the arrow move actually? So in the upper corner, you see what it looks like on Europeana, and in the lower corner, you can see the XML EDM file with 2 colorful highlights. In green, you can see the EDM type is 3D, and in yellow, you can see the elements if shown at and if shown by. I also put them here on this side. So these are specific specifically filled out like this for 3D. So the most important is the EDM type if 3D always, and within the element or aggregation, you have the if shown by with that contains a link to your online 3D resource. Okay, that was very briefly the EDM. Now we go into the EPF. All data partners have their own requirements, have their own goals and capabilities. And since we recognize that, and we want to support all organizations who want to share their data with Europeana, the EPF sets out a range of scenarios that we call tiers. And these tiers are meant to share your collections with Europeana based on what data partners, what they want and what they're able to provide. These tiers are based on real examples and have been developed in wide-ranging discussions. So we really thought about it. If you want to know more about this, you can again go to pro.europeana.eu, and there are also videos explaining a bit more about how to work with this, but I will briefly give you an overview as well. So, the Europeana publishing framework. There are two kinds of tiers. First, we have the content tiers. It is based on the principle, the more you give, the more you get. So the content tiers at the moment range from tier 1 until tier 4, and then 1 is the lowest, 4 is the highest, and they go for all media types. It depends mainly on the providing us with direct links to high quality media. Of course, this will be different for text as it will be for images and also for 3D. And then the other thing it relies upon is the licenses. The more open your license is, the higher the quality tiers for the content get. And of course, improved measures raise the quality. The other pair of tiers we have are the metadata tiers. So the metadata tiers range from A till C, and they provide the users with extra information. So rich metadata can include keywords. They can have linked open data vocabularies or thesauri that are included. And what we find very important as well, not only to improve the findability, but also the multilinguality. So if you include language tags, the tiers will go up as well. We would like to include more specific metadata elements for 3D, because yeah, it is of course all media types are a bit different, but we are still working on that, and we would like to connect that to the extension that we have in mind for the EDM elements, because then the elements can store specific 3D information. So, how does this work in practice? Imagine you provide a link to your online resource. And then, well, you want it to end up in as an item in Europeana. But for 3D, this also can include an embeddable viewer. And to embed a viewer in Europeana, there are 2 points that are important. The viewer that you use has to be an OEmbed endpoint. So if you go to the website oembed.com, you will find how to do this. I have been told it is not so difficult to do, but yeah, you can find more information on this website. The other point that is important is that the viewer you use is on the list of viewers that Europeana recognizes as supported viewers. Because of course we don't know of all viewers that exist, so it is nice to be able to know the background of it. If your viewer is not on the list yet, you can always contact us, and then we can change it or see what we can do. As an example, on the for me the right side, you can see the difference between a viewer that is embedded and that is not embedded. So in the lower corner, you can see the head of Hermes, provided to us by the Fitzwilliam Museum. And of course, this is a 2D image of a 3D object. But in our portal on an item page, you can turn the head around upside down and interact with it directly. In the upper page, you can see that it's still working, but you have to click it again to interact with it in the viewer itself, and it is not embedded. In the future, we have additional ideas, namely to provide a direct link to the contents that can be streamed directly to the web page. So we would use WebGL, JavaScript, and/or HTML5 canvas. So it's not even a viewer, but you can really interact with it. But this is not a feature that is not yet supported by the Europeana website. And of course, this is also work in progress, and the guidelines have to be more specified. As an example, you can, if you're curious what your content would look like on the Europeana website, and to give you an indication, you can go to a website which is a link to a tool that we created. The website is metis-sandbox.europeana.eu, and if you go there and upload an EDM file with a link to your data, then you can see what it would look like in an item page on Europeana. But additionally, it will also generate a quality report for you that is based on the EPF, and it includes also suggestions for improvements. So that would be helpful. If, of course, you don't have EDM yourself yet, you can make use of the example files that we have to get started and just kind of try your link in an available XML file. Yes, then what have we been doing? Looking at 3D, we now have, and that is very important to start with, of course, I'm a historian by study, so this is the key. We started with a definition. The definition we now have for 3D is 3D content refers to a digital object with 3D geometry. 2D representation, so images of three-dimensional real-world objects like sculptures, should not be given the type 3D in Europeana records. So geometry, yeah. And well, as I said, in the future, we aim to define a way to measure the quality of the 3D object itself that is provided by you in the link in the is shown by or is shown at, so we can really make real-time calculations, let's say. But to do that and to make it standardized is being researched, let's say. Then here you can see Contentiors 0, we do not do this anymore. Contentiors 0 is no longer possible. So for Contentiors 1, you only need a valid landing page. For 2, you want to have a media resource that is qualified as a good media resource. So not an image or PDF. And for 3 or 4, that actually depends on the licenses I told you. So the more open it is, the higher it gets. But beware, the non-compliance of an image or PDF extension is just if you provide that as the main resource for a 3D object, because it is not a 3D object. But if you provide it as additional material, that is fine, as long as also one of the materials is a 3D object. So I hope it didn't scare you too much, but you can all find things back to look at it in your own time on the Europeana knowledge base. Here you can find all kinds of hands-on information. you can find detailed information, technical information, and there is also training material available. Also, what I was mentioning before, the XML files, templates, let's say, are also over there. So EDM is there, EPF, all guidelines is over there. How to raise the quality, see what you can provide. And something I did not mention is the ELF. But I will not talk about that now. It is very important, but it is a subject by itself. It concerns licensing and to choose which rights statements you can or should use in specific cases. Do you now have to do all this by yourself? Well, no, of course not. This is where you also, well, you can, for example, ask Henk. So we have 13 domain and thematic aggregators and 27 national aggregators. So it is important that you think of your content and think what would be a good place, house for your content to be. So if you have, for example, fashion content, then you could contact the European Fashion Heritage Association. Or if you have archaeology content, then you can contact Karara. So, but national aggregators are also a very good idea. Then if you are in one country, you can see how your national aggregator can help you. Of course, it's also findable at pro.europeana.eu, which aggregators there are. Then a little bit more about the data space. We are talking about it now so much that we abbreviated it to DS. But well, as Ilaria already mentioned, Europeana Foundation works together with Karara, Time Machine and Inception, and on the data space for 3D, so the 3D specialization, let's say. What is the data space? The work to deploy the common European data space for cultural heritage, it's led by the Europeana Foundation, but in collaboration with a consortium of 18 partners from 9 EU countries. And one of them is TMO. And so this is the 18 partners is the overarching idea, and for 3D we have a selection of the partners. So as it follows for 3D, it follows the Commission recommendation that urges also to look at the importance of digitizing monuments and sites and museum objects and other tangible heritage that is especially at risk, but all other digitization is very welcome as well. And as we are speaking right now, we are in bullet point number 2, let's say, to develop capacity in the form of guidance and trainings. That is what we're doing right now. Yes, and there's also a working group to foster synergies with the network, which is also very important. And then the future. There is a big ambition in 3D digital assets. But as I told you before, some adjustments in EDM and EPF are needed. The effort that we do here, not here, but here you can see the big ambition. The effort is also supported by additional projects like 5D Culture and the Eureka 3D project, and they have started exploring 3D workflows, storage, reuse, and yeah, how they can contribute this with all this to the 3D objectives. Well, and now the only thing I can say more is we are looking forward to receiving a lot of your 3D objects, because the more we have, the better we are also able to define the standards and improve everything and raise the quality. So, last slide. Yes, that was it for me. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Lianne. Thank you so much. While you were talking, there was one question in the chat, which I think you partly addressed already, but I wanted to read it out loud for you, which is, it seems that technically Europeana does not serve any 3D files You can only get those via the Sketchfab API, which is an authenticated API. I would love to see Europeana serve 3D model files themselves. Makes life easier to do something with these.
Yes, I completely agree. Yeah, no, but that is indeed the case at the moment. As I was saying, at the moment it is not possible to directly interact with it on the website, but we do need a viewer in between. We are definitely looking at this, and that is the idea for the future.
Thank you for the remark. I think now it's over to Henk, who will talk a bit about the role of CARARE as one of the aggregators of Europeana, and also give a brief overview of the available workflows before we move on to the step-by-step presentation part. Please, Henk.
Okay, thank you, Ilaria, and thank you, Lianne, as well. Lianne explained how what is needed to get the 3D models right in Europeana. And I will explain a bit of how we can help you as CARARE to do that. So I will start sharing my screen again. And then it should be okay for you. Can you see it? All right.
Yes.
Well, first of all, let me tell you a bit about CARARE, because it's always good to know who you are possibly working with. We are a non-profit membership organization, bringing together all kinds of organizations in cultural heritage, and especially archaeological and architectural heritage. You might wonder what CARARE is standing for. It is Connecting Archaeology and Architecture in Europe. So that's what we are here on Earth for. Our main objectives are to advance professional practice and foster appreciation of the digital heritage. And to do that, we provide advice, guidance, training on good practices in creation, publication, and use of digital data. And we also provide technical services to enable organizations all around Europe to share their digital contents. We work on and provide metadata, standards, linked data, interoperability, and 3D and GI for all the organizations that we help. So I will go to the next one. We have been offering and working with heritage organizations and professionals since 2010. Started off as a project aggregating content for Europeana, and the first 3D data set we encountered in around 2012, 2013. We kept in touch as a project with all our partners, and in 2016 we decided to become a non-profit membership association, so as to continue our work without being dependent on this specific project. We participated since in a number of projects. Some were mentioned already by Lianne, like 3D Icons and Share 3D, and there are many more. Currently, we are involved in 4CH, 5D Culture, and Tech for Heritage. I imagine if you're not familiar with all these abbreviations, it must be a dizzying experience to see them all. We are also partners in the consortium, as explained already, for the European Data Space for Cultural Heritage, and we are an accredited aggregator for archaeological, architectural heritage and 3D. We also have a help desk and can offer advice on 3D, and we have a training hub and run webinars. So now you know more or less all about Karara. And what can we do for you? We help you as an organization to share your 3D models and other digital content in Europeana. And we have two main workflows to support the shared 3D data delivery and publishing to Europeana. One is the shared 3D dashboard, and the other one is the possibility to upload metadata from your own system, your own conforming to your own metadata schema, and upload it to the aggregation services in Mint and REPOX. I will explain a bit more about those now. If you look at Share 3D, I will show you a screen print later on. It is the process is relatively simple. You can add a new model from Sketchfab. That's a prerequisite. You need to have your model on Sketchfab. Then you import metadata from Sketchfab, and you can edit, add more or edit the metadata, and think about the metadata like identity, such as title, description, subject, terms, language, but also the place of the 3D heritage object, the time or the time period, copyright, licensing, relations, which may be files outside Sketchfab or resources outside Sketchfab. And of course, information about the model itself, how it was created, you can add over there as well. When you've done that, you just submit, and Karara will validate the metadata and will deliver it to Europeana for ingestion. And Europeana does the actual ingest and publishes it on the site. On the other hand, we have the Mint REPOX flow, which consists of an import of metadata in Mint in all kinds of formats, create a mapping of the metadata to the Carare and EDM Europeana data for schema, Europeana data model schema. So you create a mapping, and you can then transform the map metadata to the Carare EDM schemas, after which you can preview it, and if you're satisfied, publish it to More, which is a repository of the metadata. There also you can check and analyze and validate the data, the metadata in all, like you can do in all steps. And when you're completely satisfied, it is time to be harvested by Europeana. In this way, this series of steps you have to follow, Karara will give you support whenever you need it. Most of the times it's not self-explanatory to go through all the steps and to do the mapping correctly. So most of the time you will need support, and we will give you that support. If you want to know more about this, you can go to the website carare.eu and find the introduction to the aggregation services, where you find a lot of more of materials, so you can see what you're starting at. Oh, this is a screen print of Share 3D dashboard. It is not what you usually see, because this is an admin page. So here are all the models, not published, awaiting, published, and withdrawn. But when you log in, you see only your own models. But this gives you an impression of how it looks like. And this is the Mint workplace space, and you see it's quite different. It has more opportunities, but it's also less self-evident and self-explanatory as Shared 3D. I think this is the last of my slides of introduction, the workflows and Karara. So I'll hand it over back to Ilaria.
Thank you very much. If there are no questions right now, I think we can hand it over to Beatrice Vaienti. Hi, Beatrice from EPFL, who was so nice to test out this Share 3D workflow with one of the models that EPFL is developing, and she will give us just a brief presentation about the experience in testing it and some feedback on this. And after that, we will move on to the step-by-step presentation.
Perfect.
Please.
Thanks a lot, Ilaria. So I hope you see my screen. Yeah, perfect. As Ilaria presented, I work at EPFL, DDH Lab, and today I will briefly present what are the results and the kind of experiences that we had when trying to upload our own model inside of Share 3D with the Sketchfab workflow. So first of all, wait, I think it's okay. First of all, I will present briefly what is our model. So what are the peculiarities? In our case, we decided to use a urban model that we have been developing during the past year of the city of Jerusalem between 1840 to 1940. We actually selected a section of it. So inside of the total of more than 10,000 buildings, we have a subset of more than 700. And with the related terrain mesh from SRTM 30. And in particular, here you can see also the details about the size in triangles and in vertices. It's not a huge file itself, but still it can pose some let's say, difficulties since we are working in a urban scale and we wanted to see how it went. So first of all, more technically, there are some peculiarities that we were interested in focusing a bit on when testing this workflow. First of all, our datasets are at a urban scale. And as I was presenting, they have themselves some peculiarities. And moreover, the datasets we are using are diachronic, because what we have been doing with this 3D model is actually we have used it in the past years as a way to aggregate information from several sources, cartographic sources. And as a consequence, I'm talking about something that is actually GIS based. So it comes with several layers of information on top, which are interesting for us to keep. And the file is informative and hierarchical. That is, actually, it's not really the 3D model itself that has a single information attached. The single buildings that compose the 3D models have information themselves, and they have this information in a hierarchical structure. In fact, we are using as a data format in this moment, CityJSON, that is JSON encoding of CityGML, which basically it's a good way for us to keep together the GIS aspects and the 3D aspects in the same file. I will go briefly, also following a bit what has been already presented on the workflow. Here you see the first part, so the uploading Sketchfab, so something that is actually pretty easy because it just requires us to actually upload a mesh. What we did in particular was we extracted a mesh from our complete database from our model, and we just uploaded that. And here you can see what's happening instead in the phase of linking the account. So very easily here you see I linked my account, and now I have access to the model that are present in my Sketchfab. And here we can choose which models of our Sketchfab account are going to be transferred inside of Share 3D. And here now it's present in my dashboard. And here you see the first phase, that is the metadata completion. I think the nice thing is that the metadata is actually very easily subdivided into, let's say, pieces, and it's very easy to see how much of it is completed every time. So it's kind of a step-by-step procedure to insert all this kind of informations. And in particular, one interesting thing for us is the possibility of having these relations. So the possibility of linking files from the outside, because as I was saying, we have a data format that being GIS based has its peculiarities. So we don't want actually to lose the opportunity of linking with the original data format. And especially since we were listening that the idea would be to go probably outside of Sketchfab in the future, I think this is already great to have still a viewer, but with the possibility of linking to the original data form in a sense. So to wrap up a bit the impressions, as I was saying, there is the peculiarities of our models, of course, pose some challenges. And it's not easy to have an easy solution to view every one of these peculiarities on the web. In particular, the diachronic part of our file, the file that our buildings also have an information about when they appear and sometimes on when they disappear. In this case, in my opinion, there are two workarounds that can be used still with Share 3D. On one hand, it is possible to encode this as an animation in Blender and then to import the animation directly inside of Sketchfab. Or on the other hand, probably as like a more sound solution, if we want really to be able to explore the diachronic part, it would be to separate the file into temporal phases. In this way, we can still visualize temporal phases and use the current solution. Then, as I was already anticipating, the fact that we have this very specific GIS-based hierarchical structure, in our case, the workaround is dealing with external linked files that still keep the original data format that, in our case, has to be, in a sense, connected to GIS. To conclude, I think that in this case, Share 3D can be let's say, an easy and nice way to actually visualize the results of a 3D modeling pipeline. It's also true that what we have is not a point cloud, it's the result of a process of 3D reconstruction. But since we have this guided process for the metadata completion, it's true that we are not just putting out a 3D result, we are also incorporating information about how it was created and in which methodologies. And also in our case, as I was saying, it's one good feature is the possibility of actually keeping track of external publications and repositories. So that's it. And if you have any questions, I'm here.
Thank you, Beatrice. Thank you. I think this was a very nice example of a slightly maybe different kind of 3D model and the sort of the issues encountered, but also the ways around contributing it to CARARE. And I think unless you have a specific question for Beatrice, however, we can also provide our contact details, perhaps. I would like to ask Sander Münster to start the presentation of the sort of really step-by-step workflow of Mint REPOX and Share 3D. So please, Sander, over to you.
Thanks, Ilaria. And after you have heard much about what Mint REPOX is doing, what Share 3D is doing, and also we had this nice example by the EUBFL colleagues, how it works, it's my pleasure now to introduce to you a bit about how this would be done, maybe stepwise on a step-per-step order. And let me maybe start with a look on this REPOX and Mint workflow. And that would be something specifically subsumed under that question, how to retrieve large and or changing repositories into the Europeana. And Henk has already introduced what is possible. To have an overview at a nutshell, the target audience for this kind of workflows is a group of model owners which are operating repositories with changing model pools. So where a aggregation, for instance, via Share 3D is not a good option. Requirements also mentioned for that has been that the data objects are conforming to the definition of heritage, so that it is cultural heritage. It needs also licenses which are compatible with Europeana, which enable and allow at least aggregation and showing these models. And of course, it needs to have presentation derivatives, so 3D model sets available in formats which are compatible for viewing and for aggregating, for instance, GLTF. What is also required, metadata, has been introduced by Lianne already. Of course, a sufficient set of metadata, minimum set of metadata is required for describing these objects, making them findable, addressable, etc. How to do this? In a nutshell, it would be a highly individual workflow where we are talking about. So each repository is very specific. So please contact Karara TMO colleagues to get support for this process. The main point is to export metadata information, in our case, for instance, into an XML file. So there are several options for this, and to make these XML files aggregatable. To bring you one live example, let me switch to a project we are happy to conduct at my professorship in Jena, which is the DFG 3D Viewer project. So DFG is a German research association. This is the main research founder in Germany, and it is operating a own infrastructure for making different data formats visible, accessible, and we are now having the great opportunity to enhance this data infrastructure, mainly dealing with 2D data so far into a third dimension. The objective behind that specific project is a very low-level objective with regards to technical capabilities. So the idea is to have a Sketchfab-like modular viewer infrastructure, which would be able to connect and integrate multiple repositories at the one hand, but as mentioned also for the Europeana, multiple viewers, also more feature-rich viewers, which enables, for instance, to do virtual research with these models. In our case, an additional step is also to connect to a modular processing pipeline. So for instance, having modules which do the metadata enrichment, which provides a reconstruction service to refining, retuning, reducing complexity of models, etc., and so on. Currently, we are at the phase where we have a live demonstrator and an experimental repository operational. So we started a public beta last month with currently 3,900 3D objects, 3D models in it. And also we developed an AI-based, computer-based image recognition toolset, which, for instance, do automatically the classification of 3D content, also retrieve corresponding AAT classes. So AAT is operated by Getty as art and architectural thesaurus to provide a standardized vocabulary for these kind of items, but also to retrieve corresponding media, resolve place names, etc. That is where we are standing at the moment. Next step is to connect further libraries, in our case, 4 additional state libraries in 2024, but also integrate further data sources, aggregating further data sources, for instance, with scan the world models, etc. What does it mean with regards to a aggregation workflow into Europeana? So we tested a bit how to set up this kind of aggregation workflow. And in our case, the prerequisites has been that we are operating an experimental repository, an SQL database, but also a LAMP, Linux, Apache, MySQL, PHP infrastructure to run PHP scripts. And we also have a sparse set of metadata available. what happens? We created a set of server scripts which are run as a cron job, so on a daily basis on the repository side, and those cron jobs are calling specific PHP files. That means those PHP files loading a template, a predefined template for the EVM description, and injecting the metadata for the specific model. The result is stored in the same location on the server as the model data, and in the end we have another PHP script which creates a JSON list, so a list file where all newly created XML files are listed. Most importantly, for all who would like to replicate this kind of workflow, how costly is it? In our case, the XML exporter, with really great support by the Karara colleagues, took us 10 hours in total time. The JSON aggregation with 2 hours, and overall we had some communication diving into the workflows, etc. I would assess those with around 4 hours. So in total, it was an operation done in 2 workdays. For those who are maybe now interested to also replicate it, please let me show these points from the initial slide again. Please feel highly invited to contact Karara TMO colleagues and to processing and getting guided through these next steps. Also, there is really great help available for this, and it is possible. That's about the first workflow. And now let me do a live demo specifically on the Share3D import from Sketchfab. This is specifically, as mentioned before, for importing data which is already aggregated into Sketchfab, also with some requirements, for instance, or specifically licenses enabling this, but also data objects, which meets the definition of cultural heritage. What we have also prepared for you, and that is something my colleagues surely will provide you the links via the chat, is several types of documentation of resources, a video screencast, step-by-step tutorial, and also the Share3D documentation. But that's maybe enough at this point for introducing here. Let me now switch to my second window, the browser window. And please give me a short feedback if my browser is now visible. Wonderful. So for those who already created an account, and I was happy to seeing this in the chat that there has been some persons who already did, you shall be able to now log into the dashboard Share3D EU. So link in that case dashboard.share3D EU, and please provide your credentials, email address, your password. Let me now log in and now start with this more or less empty page. There's one important step marked in red here, and that means that you need to provide a kind of agreement which enables and allows Europeana and Karara as this aggregator to aggregate your content into the Europeana. So let me click on this Sign DEA agreement, so the red button here. If I click here, I have an extra page opening, which provides me this agreement. I can type in my credentials, the type of organization, address, URL, name of authorized representative, and the role in the organization. Also, of course, a work email that is taken from my login data. Afterwards, I go to the end and need to sign in as a data provider and submit this form. Let me quickly repeat. So name of the organization, let me type in PMO here. So address, I would keep it empty for this point. timemachine.eu. And yeah, let me try with my name and now filling these points here. And afterwards, I need to confirm here with my signature. Let me submit these things, and now you have seen I got this message, DEA signed. And let's now go back to my Share 3D dashboard page. Why does this red button still appear here? Of course, it needs to be checked and validated at this moment. After I have signed this DEA agreement, which is the first step, it's now my chance to import models from my Sketchfab account. To do this, I click on Add New Model. A window appears here, and I have to click here to link to my Sketchfab account. I close it, just showing it again. Add New Model. Click here to link to your Sketchfab account. Let me do this. And in that case, it's already pre-filled what I need here as my credentials. So in other cases, you may need to fill it. Let me log in with my email address. What I need to do here is to tell Sketchfab that this login from this Share 3D resource is a authorized one. So in that case, I need to accept this authorization request. Again, if you receive this, please accept it. Then you will be guided to your model homepage. You will see the models you have already uploaded into Sketchfab. And you see here the Share 3D, so it is something where the Share 3D is already managing these views here. And for instance, and what I can do here is, of course, to select one or multiple of my models. Let me click on one of those. I will take this, and then I will get the feedback. Click here to import this model from Sketchfab. Again, you have your model view. If you click on one, you can click here to import this model from Sketchfab. Yes, I wish. And now this model has been added successfully. If you wish, you can do it for other models as well. I would keep it at this moment with one model only. And now go back to the models homepage. So this red link here, back to models homepage. I have to click once to go back to my Share 3D dashboard main view. What you see now is that I have one additional thumbnail seen here, and that is my freshly imported model. What has been already mentioned is that this model needs to have some qualified metadata. And to add this metadata, I have to click once on this model. Again, please click on the model to come to this metadata view. I click now. And there I have the definitions of metadata on the right. Let's start with this tab identity. So if there's model ID, please do not change. And you have to define a title. This is a mandatory field, by the way. You see it with these small asterisks here. So I define what is the name of this object. So it's a sculpture in Karara. Of course, please select more sounding, more appreciated definitions here. What you need also to describe is a description of this. So what is the object about and so on. So please be as precise as possible. You have also the opportunity to add some AAT terms. Again, AAT is maintained by Getty and provides a kind of thesaurus of terms. And for instance, let me try with sculpture, visual works. You can resolve this into these LOD class here. You can add additional subject terms, but not necessarily. Let me now save the changes. And now I have updated the model information. Next, let's go to the place information. Again, I was now on the identity tab. I click now on the place tab. Place name. You can use this as a free text field. So it's located in Gera, so in Germany. Or of course, you can alternatively also search for a specific place. I would keep it for this demonstration with the place name information as free text. Again, to be entered here. Let me save my changes now. And switch to the next ribbon here. Time. You can enter a time, a date where this model has been created, for instance, or not the model, sorry, the object has been created. So in our case, it was an object which was created in 1990. And of course, you can enter also some information about periods. There is already a pre-selection about possible information here. I will keep it with this free text information, which is mandatory about the temporal relation referring to the model itself. When has this been created? Copyright is most importantly. So as already mentioned, of course, it needs a proper copyright to enable people to viewing this content, to reusing this content, or even to aggregating this metadata information. Therefore, please select a license. There is a chance to selecting one of the predefined licenses. So for instance, the Creative Commons license, most preferably if you are allowed to publish under this license, CC0 with no restrictions for reusing or sharing. That would be my preference too. And of course, you can enter any copyright statement which is required to show, for instance, if you are licensing things with naming of the creator. Again, I need to change to save my changes. And receive this link model uploaded. I've now selected a license. Let's now go to the relations. So, as mentioned by Beatrice in the previous presentations, this enables you to provide links also to external data sources or to external bibliographies. So, for instance, references to libraries, etc. I would skip this point for the presentation. If you wish, you can read about this at also in the manual and the tutorial resources. And one final point left here, that is a ribbon about the model creation. I can now select when this model has been created. So in our case, it was last year, 2022. And you can also add information about how it has been created. and by whom it has been created. In that case, my Sketchfab username has been used as an initial filling, but in our case, it was my colleague Sophie Hopf who did it, so I will enter both information here. Let me now save changes. Again, model created add. Also model creation description, you can describe about the process and or select one of these predefined ways to how this model has been created. And of course, nominate the creator. I've now filled in all of those ribbons. If I wish, I can preview the EDM, which provides me with a description what information will be contained in this EDM file. Let me close this again. It's a preview EDM to preview what is in this description. And finally, I can submit now this model plus information. Please be aware that after submitting, this model is not put live into the Europeana. But what is taking place is that the Karara team is reviewing all submitted models, and you will be notified about the progress via your email address and getting information in the email as quick as this model is online.
Sander, do you mind if I interrupt you 1 second?
Please
because
do.
there were a few questions in the chat.
Yes.
For this specific bit. So perhaps I can actually invite Albert and Gabriel to just ask the questions directly, because there were, quite a lot of questions going on. Would you like to please to unmute yourselves and ask ahead? I see questions from Albert, Sierra, and Gabriel Budar. Otherwise, I will read them out loud. Should I just read them? Okay. So there was a there was a question about well, at some point you were talking about not the model but the real object, which Kate actually addressed. Kate, would you like perhaps to pick this up, because you have been responding in the chat? Hi, Kate.
Hello.
Hello, thank you.
I mean, is Lianne still with us?
Yes.
And because their questions are very specific about how we use EDM, she might be the better person to answer. But I just think it is a bit confusing, the distinction that's made between the real object and the digital object. But if you think about it in terms of helping people to find your content, then we know that people are looking for photographs or drawings or maps or sound recordings by the subject coverage, and that includes the time facet of the content. So if you think about it in those terms, rather than kind of being purist about whether you're describing, I mean, it is a description of the model in a way, but you're just saying what the model's about, rather than talking about it in technical terms. It's very helpful for end users to actually find things that are good for them. Does that help?
No, I completely agree that both are important, and it's essential to be able to say what is this a model of, and what are the dates and various other things. The issue is that this interface uses the word model with no qualification for both, and that's completely opaque, both to a user and to a person trying to fill it in.
Okay, I can take that away and look at the user interface of the Share 3D tool and just see whether we can improve the help that we're giving within the tool.
That would be really helpful.
And you don't have my email address, but you if you use the info@carari.eu email address, we'll pick up the questions afterwards, but I could definitely take on board that we perhaps need to look at the help that we're providing within the tool itself.
Yeah, it is of course always a bit the question, are we talking about a real world object or a model? And it's an ongoing discussion also how to model this, because the perfect solution has not been invented yet, but let's keep talking indeed.
And sorry, just continuing on this, Stefan also asks if there are tags from Sketchfab, they are not included. So the EDM data is only from Share3D. Is this correct?
Hello.
Okay.
I may be stepping on Henk's toes now. Actually, we're looking at the Sketchfab API at the moment to check exactly what's happening with the tags that are on the Sketchfab, created on the Sketchfab record. The tool is designed to import any metadata that exists on Sketchfab and then put it in relevant elements in what will become an EDM record. And it seems like there's something that's not happening at the moment that we maybe thought was happening. So we're just checking the API and how it's configured against our database. So there may be news and improvement on this one as well.
Okay, sorry, Sander, we interrupted you. Over to you, because I also see we're running a bit late. So please continue and yeah.
Thank you, Ilaria. But from my view, nothing to add more, because that would be the live presentation workflow. And thanks for posing this question also. So the last point on my side, but I think we already started with that. If there are any questions, if there are any remarks there, and happy to have, for instance, Kate, or specifically Kate with us, who is of course the best person to answer your questions. So.
Yeah, so I already see a few more questions in the chat. So this is offers us a nice transition to the Q&A section of the event, these last 10 minutes. First, I read another question from Stefan, which is there some sort of translation between links from Sketchfab to relations in Share3D? Kate or Henk, I think this is for you.
If I may answer this, I will be very brief, because I am not sure if it does. So I think I will have to give this over to Kate.
Can you say the question again?
Sure. So the question is there some sort of translation between links from Sketchfab to relations in Share3D?
Okay, so we have the Sketchfab API defines certain elements in the record. Some users enter quite full descriptions of the object that they're providing a 3D model of, and that's especially the case for museum curators, I think. They write quite long descriptions, and sometimes within the descriptive text they include links, perhaps to the item on their collection catalogue, or perhaps to web pages with other information about that item. If that information's provided in free text, it will go into the description field on the Share3D record. So then what can happen is when we come and validate the record, it may be that it would be better to put that link into a relations element, because within Europeana, it will then become a dynamic link rather than just a simple text string. So sometimes there's a manual change that's made to the record just to improve the way it works within Europeana. So that was a long way of saying that if there's an element defined on Sketchfab and we can map it to an element in the Share 3D tool, that's what we do, but not some of the information is coming through the, there's quite a large ability to write descriptive text on Sketchfab, and then that just gets mapped to the description field. But that doesn't mean to say that the text can't be edited afterwards. But behind the scenes, there's information, so the actual links to the object on Sketchfab itself, to a preview of the object on Sketchfab, and to a landing page. Those are captured behind the scenes and become part of the EDM record when it's actually published. So you have to, I don't know if you click on the preview EDM element, you'll see the data that I mean. It's not displayed on the data entry forms, because obviously we don't want people to edit that data. It's quite a long string. It's not exactly, it's a bit unwieldy, but you see the information is there, and that goes through to Europeana, and that's what they then use to embed the model in the viewer on Europeana's page. Does that help?
Hopefully so. I go back to another question which was not yet addressed, which came up, Zander, during your presentation. This is about one of the fields in the dashboard of Share 3D, and it's about what does "is part of" mean? Does it mean it's part of, it's the building to which the specific object pertains? Is it part of a collection? Is part of, exactly, that field that we see now. That's the meaning of it.
Me again?
As you wish.
I mean, I think in general, in terms of a Dublin core record, it means that the object, you can use it for the object is part of a collection. Europeana has a specific use of that element, so we sometimes use it to indicate if the content's being provided as part of a project. But I think in general it means is part of a collection. And Lianne can probably help out on that one.
No, it's exactly as Kate says. It is normally used for collections, but for projects, we sometimes use this. But since the field can be repeated, that is actually not a problem, because it can be both a collection and a project. Let's say a part of collection and a project.
Perfect. Thank you. Then there was another question from Stefan as well. So this is a bit a case similar to the one that Beatrice presented, Beatrice Valienti from EPFL. They said they also have a diachronic model. So they're in a way facing the same issue of how to present a temporal dimension into a 3D model on the Share 3D dashboard. And the question was, could Storyteller's API from Share 3D be an option to solve this issue for temporal models? Henk or Kate, I guess.
I don't think this would be an option, but again, Kate can probably answer this much better than I can. Please, Kate.
We're slightly distracted by John Heinbach's question about alternatives to Sketchfab, so I wasn't 100% listening to the question about stories. Could you repeat it, please?
Yes, shall I? We have a diachronic model. Could Storyteller's API from Shared 3D be an option to solve this kind of models? So to have development in time, several stages.
I don't think so. I actually would like to see that question written down and to have an opportunity to come back to it later on, if that's okay. Because it's something that we would need to give some thought to.
Yeah.
I'm also thinking, if I may, that perhaps one good idea will be to collect all these questions that came in through the chat and address them in a sort of written Q&A that we can circulate among participants to the event. So this can be additional information, and of course you're welcome to always contact our speakers. I see a raised hand from Isabella, please.
Yes, thank you, Isabella from Time Machine as well. So I think that, by the way, the small remark by John Hindemark is very interesting, because there's probably something to explore more in depth for the next development of the data space in this common direction. With Europeana and Time Machine, and all these elements, as for example the fact that we have models over time, the fact that probably we wish link the model to annotation or through Wikidata, and also we need to have a platform that is not really a proprietary platform. So all these elements, I think, that are absolutely interesting, and they are something that we have to take in account for a sort of common wish list for the data space. So I think that it's very, very interesting to have this type of elements, to collect this type of observations, and then we can, of course, put them in a common dialogue, in a common discussion for next improving development through the Time Machines also community that we know that has a sort of very spread differences in data production and in model that we can potentially put together in the platform. Just this small, this very, very quick remark from my part, from my side, because it's absolutely passionate to see also your participation and the size of your interest. Thank you.
Thank you, Isabella. I think we're really running out of time, so I'll just share this slide, which I hope you can see in a second, while we wrap up the general part, at least, of the webinar. This is just a slide with our contacts, which of course you can use to reach out to us at any time. And I think for what we wanted to achieve for the webinar today, we already put a lot of information on the plate, and we are very grateful for your questions. We promise to get back to you with a sort of takeaway messages document together with a link to the recording of the event. And for the moment, I will stop the recording. And I will invite those who are interested to stay, because there's now the opportunity to try and upload one of your own models while having assistance from our instructors today. And again, thank you for your attendance.